afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome once again to the Global Business Insight podcast.
Morning, good evening, and welcome everyone to a brand new series of the Global Business Insights podcast. I'm here once again with my partner in crime, Charlotte de Brabant. We're going to be talking in this series about hyper leadership, which is a very relevant topic to the market and industry right now. Charlotte, do you just want to give us a quick intro on why we're going to be talking about that subject for this series, please?
Yeah, of course, Max. Great pleasure to be here. You know, from my perspective, I think hyper leadership, it just matters greatly, especially in these volatile times that we live in the times of uncertainty, and in particular because leadership has just fundamentally changed. We are no longer operating in these cycles of disruption followed by stability. We are actually operating in continuous volatility. And if leaders fail to recognize that uncertainty is structural, they will keep applying outdated models built for predictability, and that creates just more fragility within their companies. So it's important because organizations today don't fail from lack of intelligence. They fail from slow adaptation, unclear decisions, and leadership behaviors rooted in control rather than learning. So hyper leadership in the series that we'll be talking about is very much about building the capacity to navigate uncertainty with clarity, speed, responsibility. So it ensures that leaders don't just react to change, but design systems internally with human and technology that can then evolve faster than the environment around them.
Okay, interesting, and that's sets the tone nicely for what's going to be episode 1. So again, I think that's a highly relevant topic to for us to be speaking about. Rings so true with I'm sure so many of us that have experienced that sort of control-based leadership, micromanagement, and all those things that are kind of old school ways of running businesses that really aren't going to drive success in the modern world. So without further ado, let's go into episode 1. Episode 1 is leading in environments of permanent disruption. So first question for you, Charlotte. You use the term permanent disruption rather than just disruption. So what do you mean by that? And why does this distinction matter for leaders?
Very good question, Max. I mean, especially in these times, permanent disruption is really all around us. And the distinction, I think, is critical because it changes how leaders fundamentally orient themselves. Disruption used to be framed as an event, something unexpected that temporarily destabilized an otherwise stable system. So permanent disruption means that instability is no longer episodic, it's structural. Technology cycles are shorter than organizational learning cycles. Geopolitical and climate risks overlap with supply chain, and AI is just accelerating change faster than actual governance models can adapt. So for leaders, this means you cannot lead as if stability will return. If your leadership model is still built on the assumption that things will settle down, you are constantly preparing for a future that will never arrive. Hyper leadership stands and it starts from the acceptance that uncertainty is the environment, not the obstacle. So once leaders internalize that, they will stop resisting reality and start designing organizations that are resilient, adaptive, and capable of continuous recalibration.
Right. So that makes sense then. So we used to talk about disruption back 5 years ago, 6 years ago when I was in software. We talk about this being a disruptor, disrupting businesses. What we're talking about here is that permanent disruption. They've been disrupted. That's going to continue. It's not going to stop. So how do you lead with that uncertainty? So thinking that through on a more practical basis, how does that shift affect what leaders actually should focus on a day-to-day basis then?
Well, it forces a move away from over optimization and towards sense making. In stable environments, leaders, they can focus on efficiency, predictability, and incremental improvement. And in permanently disrupted environments, those priorities, Max, they can actually become dangerous because they reduce flexibility. So day to day, leaders, they need to start focusing on three things, I think. So, firstly, signal detection, narrative clarity, and decision velocity. So, signal detection, it means paying attention to these weak signals, emerging technologies, subtle shifts in employee sentiment, early customer behavior changes, rather than waiting for the perfect data. Then narrative clarity, it means helping the organization understand what matters now and why, even when the future is unclear. And decision velocity means making timely, good enough decisions rather than the perfect one, and then it's too late.
Okay, so I think, yeah, once again, this is really pertinent to the way leadership is changing, and a lot of leaders in businesses who've been in those roles for quite a few years may not see this shift happening, and then may well be wondering why their methods that they used over the last 5, 10 years of their career suddenly aren't resonating with their team anymore and aren't working so well. So what sort of leadership behaviors then tend to fail first in that kind of environment? What's the first thing that goes?
I think control orientated behaviors, they collapse very quickly. Leaders who rely on tight governance, excessive approvals, and hierarchical decision making, they just it starts to become, they become bottlenecks almost immediately. And another behavior that fails is overconfidence in historical success. Past experience can be a liability if it blinds leaders to new patterns. Leaders must be comfortable saying, we don't fully know yet, but here's how we are thinking and how we'll adapt. So organizations can handle uncertainty. What they can't handle is silence in false certainty.
Okay, so if long-term planning in that aspect is less reliable, then what's going to replace that, do you think?
What replaces traditional long-term planning is what I call adaptive intent. You still need direction. Strategy doesn't disappear, but it becomes directional rather than deterministic. Instead of detailed multi-year roadmaps, leaders define clear principles, strategic boundaries, and learning mechanisms. And this allows teams to act, I think, autonomously while staying aligned. So you're not telling people exactly what to do in 3 years. You're telling them how to think and decide when new information emerges. So hyper leadership is actually less about predicting the future and more about building the capacity to respond intelligently to multiple futures.
I think this is really indicative of how a lot of things are shifting, actually, with the uplift in the amount of people using AI for a lot of different things now. What we're really trying to hold on to is that human connection. And so hyper leadership there is, from what I'm gathering from this, is about being able to have the emotional intelligence to react in all sorts of different situations based on your knowledge, experience, but also that human instinct of working with people in the right way. I think that takes a lot of understanding and skill, actually, and it could well be quite a shift for some leaders who are stuck in the old ways of working to move on from. So I think this is very important for people to hear. So next question for you: how do leaders personally stay grounded in that constant cycle of uncertainty and permanent disruption and constant change that you're talking about?
Yeah, Max. I mean, I think it's really not easy in this current environment, and this is where inner leadership, it really becomes just as important as external leadership. And leaders who are just not grounded internally, they transmit anxiety into the organization and into the teams, and often unintentionally. And staying grounded, it just requires so much clarity of purpose and having strong internal values and deliberate reflection time, I always find. So hyper leaders, coming back to the concept, they build certain routines that protect cognitive space, also time to think, to question assumptions, and to disconnect from this constant noise around us. And grounding, it doesn't mean detachment, it means emotional regulation. When leaders model calm, curiosity, and adaptability.
Gosh, I mean, this is so true. I've had this myself several times where the leaders themselves have put panic into the organization by being reactive to situations, by speaking for the thinking and not really having that emotional intelligence grounding to really understand what the team is they're working with and how they'll receive information in the best way. A lot of this is actually about being human and just doing the things that we all need to develop ourselves and regulate our emotions and stay humble and grounded and not running away with yourself. It's interesting that the flip side to that would say that leadership is doing that at the moment, and that's why it needs to shift. So given that, what's the biggest mindset shift that leaders have to make to actually get success here? Because a lot of them won't. It's quite a mental shift away from the way they used to work into this kind of approach, I would say.
Absolutely. I think accepting that uncertainty is not a leadership failure, it's a leadership condition. And once then leaders stop trying to consistently eliminate uncertainty and instead focus on navigating it, their effectiveness, it increases dramatically. And hyper leadership is not about having all the answers. It's really about enabling the system to learn faster than the environment changes. I think this sums it up nicely.
It really does. I love this. And I think that I was reading something yesterday on this that resonates with me on it, where it's about the concept that people struggle with, actually, about when you've had a response on something, or when you've been given a piece of information, or when you've been told something, but you don't know the answer yet, you don't know the outcome. It's about being able to live with that uncertainty and going, just because I've been told something, I don't have to go and fix it straight away. I don't have to go and find the answer straight away. I don't have to try to go and fix everything straight away. Instead, a better emotional response is to actually live with that uncertainty and go, well, that's okay for the moment. It will work itself out. And I think that's what that last sentence you talked about there. It's hyper leadership is not about having all the answers. It's about actually enabling that system to learn, which I think is very, very true with the way humans should lead themselves. So I think this is all music to my ears, really, to see that actually that leadership is coming back to this kind of fundamental. I don't know if you've got any more points to make on this first episode, but that's been really, really helpful as a starting point, I think.
Absolutely. I think it starts to make us think, how are we as a leader? Start to reflect a little bit about this environment and trying to, together with your team, with your organization, just get through these volatile times.
Welcome. Thank you, Charlotte. And I will look forward to seeing you on the next episode.